We are getting close to Blizzcon and that expected Classic Plus announcement. And if you're like me, you're probably already starting to think about, well, what am I going to main? What do I want to play? And while we don't have any information about Classic Plus yet, maybe we can look to Season of Discovery for a few clues and help us make an informed decision. We don't need leaks or rumors for that, though. What we do need are spreadsheets. And that's what I've done, and I'll share with you today on this episode of the Classic Pluscast. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Classic Pluscast. I'm Dextros, your host as always. And before we get into today's juicy topic, I just want to take a moment to thank everybody for the support so far. The likes, the comments, the subs, all of it has been great, especially after that last video. There were some really interesting comments if you go back and read them. And I do have a goal coming up. I do want to hit 500 subs by Blizzcon. So if this content is interesting to you and you want to see what I report from Blizzcon itself once we get that Classic Plus announcement, hopefully, give it a sub. Keep watching the channel, turn on notifications if you want to know when there's something new to watch, and I'll be here to provide the content. Anyways, enough about that stuff. Let's get on with the show. So today we're going to do something interesting here, and we're going to try to extrapolate what the first Classic Plus power rankings, meta, tier list, whatever you want to call it, looks like based on what we're seeing as Season of Discovery so far. Now, if you've seen in previous episodes, we talked about what will be really the foundation for Classic Plus, and I do think Season of Discovery is going to be the majority of it. There might be things sprinkled in here or there that we really can't anticipate, but I don't see why we wouldn't use Season of Discovery as the foundation. And while it won't be exact, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of tuning and stuff going in. I think we can extrapolate a little bit to help us make some informed decisions for day one when the servers go live and we make our first character and start leveling. So that's the idea behind today. Now, I do want to say everything, as always, if you watch a Classic Pluscast regularly, you know this is all speculation. A lot of it's just looking at what we have available, the little meager bits of information we have, and trying to make some guesses out of it. And that's what we're going to do a lot of today. But these are guesses backed in real data, and data that I think is more interesting than it would have been if it weren't for the recent Community Fresh event that Guzo and other streamers have spearheaded on Wild Growth EU, and that's kind of spilled over everywhere at this point. In fact, let's take a look at the data right now for how that event is going. And now that we're about over a month into this event at this point, we're seeing this really level out. About 6,000 give or take raiders at any given week, most recently 6,500. And that's pretty awesome. That's a lot of people getting to see the Season of Discovery content before it either diminishes as new things come out or evolves into what Classic Plus may be. Who knows? We don't know. Nobody knows. So this is cool. And I think this gives us an interesting data point to look at, which might be relevant to the launch of Classic Plus. Now, there's a couple of reasons why I feel like this is a good data set to look at. The first is these events are mostly being run as guild-found events. Like you can only trade with people within your guild. So if someone can make, let's say, Flask of the Titans, only people in that guild can get it, and they have to get mats they farm themselves or trade within the guild. That really kind of reduces what the power creep is for things like tier sets or other things that you might be able to get by just saying, I'm going to go to a Scarlet Enclave raid and then come back and be super powerful or something like that. I'm assuming there's probably some people that aren't playing it quite to the rules of it or anything. That always happens. But overall, it seems like most people are. And I'm going to use that as an assumption that this is a fairly valid data set with a early progression, early Molten Core raid, like dungeon gearing and all that stuff as the core foundation of what's happening here. Now, there are some caveats when we look at the data that show like maybe someone is logging a Molten Core not as part of this event, but they're using Corrupted Ashbringer or something like that. That's fine. The outliers, we're going to pay a little attention to them, mostly as a power scaling effect, but not really in a power ranking effect, if that makes sense. After we're done with all this analysis, I'm going to present a tier list at the very end that I'm sure will lead to a lot of interesting discussion in the comments, so please go wild with it. I'd be curious to hear what all your takes are. One thing I do want to say here, though, is we're talking about Molten Core, and this is really just talking about Molten Core in a vacuum. This doesn't really show anything beyond what the class power is relative to Molten Core. But however, in Season Discovery, they did do things like make it so you could use fire spells, and there's no fire immunities and things like that too. Also keep in mind, Molten Core is really melee friendly because there's limited mechanics and everything. So as you think about further phase and everything too, don't feel like casters are really that bad or anything. And we'll talk about that later on for what the future may look like. But anyways, let's start looking at some of the data. Now this graph here has data from Warcraft logs from 2 most recent weeks of Season Discovery raids. And what it shows here are 2 things. The circle with the hole in the middle, the donut one, whatever you want to call it, that's really showing like the all percentile typical raider DPS rankings. So when you look at this here, it goes top to bottom in that ranking alone. On the right, however, is what the elite are, the 99th percentile. And while these are interesting and it might show like a potential power of each class, do keep in mind, there might be people coming into these raids, logging and uploading logs, who are very overgeared. They might be in Scarlet Enclave gear with a Corrupted Ashbringer, for instance. I've done that myself. So don't look too heavily into that top end, but it is interesting to keep in mind here as we look through things, because some classes in the hands of a skilled player do excel. But let's just start top to bottom and talk about these classes. Now, what really jumps to me are the top two classes, as they seem to be performing great in Molten Core with people who are probably average geared and average skilled, like the 90% of your raid. Marksman Hunter, in fact, has a really interesting point here where it isn't really, even in the hands of like either skilled or overgeared players, isn't really improving that much over. It really is kind of at a steady state where if you bring a Marksman Hunter, you kind of know how it's going to perform. And if you are a Marksman Hunter, you're going to perform well. That's a pretty good spot to be in. In fact, if I were to say to anybody who's like a average player, maybe a typical person who just wants to raid log, just want to play with the boys, Marksman Hunter looks like the best choice right now. And we'll see later data to show that kind of holds through all throughout. Now, right behind that is everybody's favorite in Classic, Fury Warrior. And Fury Warrior, I mean, it really doesn't disappoint. It only gets better as it gets better gear later on, too. A Fury Warrior rate practically tied with a Marks Hunter for the top is, in the hands of an average player, is already performing great. As long as they know how to play their class, play their rotation, hit the right buttons, all that stuff. But the ceiling, however, and again, I think this is probably skewed by Corrupted Ashbringers and whatnot, is really high in Molten Core on Warrior right now. In fact, it's the highest gap between the average and that elite 99th percentile player. So that's huge, but also there's no class sweatier than Warrior in Classic WoW. There's no class that is probably more analyzed to death than Warrior is. So that doesn't surprise me either. If we could somehow remove all of the juiced up guys from this here too, I think Warrior would still be gapping everybody for how high the ceiling is on it. And I think that's just proven time and time again with Classic WoW. Blizzard really doesn't know how to design any class to be competitive with Warrior, and they keep proving this over and over again. And I think this is going to hold in Classic Plus too. I don't see them changing enough of the class fundamentally to make that the case. Unless we're talking about poor Arms Warrior, which you see at the bottom of the list. Arms was kind of left behind, especially after the Molten Core phase in Season of Discovery. And yeah, that's a dead spec. You don't want to raid as Arms Warrior. Just don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to your raid. Assassination Rogue, another one that has a big ceiling gap on it too, performs really well. Feral Druid, which are always in demand because of Wild Strikes. If that maintains into Classic Plus 2, that is not going to go away. Feral Druids are going to be one of the most sought after classes in the game. And if you look at this here, they perform well. They also have that, again, that high skill cap, or maybe high gear cap, whatever it ends up being. And as we walk down the list too, nothing's really too surprising, except for the casters, because on their averages here, Fire Mage is really the highest ranking caster at this point at a 67.3. Casters just don't keep up in Molten Core as well as Melee does. They just don't have all the buttons to press at that point. They don't have any interesting set bonuses yet. They don't really come online, for instance, until later on. But Fire Mage is the one to play. I'm guessing that's probably because of a Scorch build or something like that. I just don't know Fire Mage. Educate me below if you do know why Fire Mages are where they're at right now. I'd love to read about that. But again, they are the caster with a high skill cap ceiling too, which is why I'm thinking Scourge comes into play. So if you're a good player, you want to play caster, you don't want to play warrior, or this is going to be an alt or something like that, Fire Mages should be in demand. I mean, they also bring decurse and stuff like that too. So like mages will always be wanted. Every class will always be wanted more or less. So Fire Mage is probably the one to go to if you just want a pumper caster. And later on, they look great too. We'll talk about that. Going down the list here, though, Affliction Warlock is really the sleeper pick, I think, for all the classes here. We'll talk later about why they're the sleeper pick, but right here, they bring good DPS, but they bring a lot of utility that you want to. If you want a class that's always going to get an invite, Warlocks seem to be one of the least populated caster classes out there, but Affliction in Season Discovery does very well. So if that philosophy around class design, gear design, all that holds through into Classic Plus, I expect to see the same for Affliction as well. And then as we go down the list, there's a few things that will stand out. Retribution Paladin, another one. I mean, I'm sure this one is all about twisting. If you're not twisting, your DPS is poor. If you are twisting, your DPS is at least right near the top for most classes. So that's probably the case there. Shadow Priest does not come online until much later on. I think around AQ 40 is when Shadow Priest starts to pump. So I'm not shocked through this low Molten Core. If you're playing a Shadow Priest at this point, you may as well just be the Decurse spot or the Dispel bot, or whatever it is. Not much there. And then the poor Shaman, they're pretty low in here too. Again, Shaman will always be in demand for totems and everything, but they're just not competitive at this point in the game. And overall, in Season Discovery, I feel like Shaman There was a lot of attention put on Shaman tanks, and I feel like because of that, the rest of the class was kind of left behind. I'd love to hear people's opinions on it because I played Alliance side, but whenever I went and looked at rankings, even not looking at this data, Shaman just don't compete very well. They bring utility. That's really what they bring to the raid. And that's not even with Bloodlust or Heroism at this point either. It's just purely on the totems. With this being a primarily horde-driven Community Fresh event too, I'm surprised to see them that low because I would have thought maybe someone would have figured something out or someone would have been like, no, they're good, and proved it, but that doesn't seem to be the case here. So Shaman, great if you play one, great for healing, but just not the best for DPS at this point, thinking about the early end game of Classic Plus. That's kind of my take on it. The last one I want to talk about here is Balanced Druid. They're kind of the same ballpark as Shadow Priest. They're bonkers in Scarlet Enclave currently, but at this point here, before they get their set bonuses or anything, they just don't keep up very well. So those are late bloomers. We'll cover late bloomers in a little bit here. So looking at this might give us a hint to what the distribution of DPS classes might be in the early Classic Plus meta. We might actually see, similar to Classic, a warrior overloaded raid with all the support classes needed to make the warrior pump better. If Blizzard doesn't do anything to change from what we're seeing in Season Discovery, I think that might be the case. Marksman Hunter might be fine too to keep up, but I don't think the long-term investment's there for any group that really wants to pump hard right off the bat. So I think the safest play if you want to play a melee DPS is really to play warrior. Nothing's changed. Nothing will change. I don't think Blizzard can get this genie back in the bottle. It's been out since the early 2000s, and I don't think it's ever going back in. Every other class is going to be wanted though. Paladins for their blessings. Hunters, if they keep Aspect of the Lion, oh yeah, that'd be great to have at least one hunter with that. Mages, Priest, yeah, you want all these classes here. A Warlock to summon half the raid who's lazy and sits in town. Yeah, you want all of that. But let's look at what the trajectory looks like for a lot of these classes later on. Now, before getting into this graph, I can't put a lot of confidence into anything on the right-hand side, the Scarlet Enclave column. And that's because I can't see the exact same replay with the set bonuses and other gear coming into account like we've seen in Season Discovery. I suspect Blizzard will change things up, and as a result, this is purely just for a speculation for where these classes may trend over time. Now, one thing to note about the Scarlet Enclave column, we're looking at the averages again. We're not looking at like the high-end elite parsers here, so this is really just your average raid member with average gear. But when we're getting to Enclave, we're probably looking at people with tier 2, tier 2, 5, tier 3 set bonuses, and some gear in there as well. You may have an Achiash, you may have some other things like that, and they're skewing some of these numbers up a little bit. But not everybody's that well geared. There are some people who are going to be in their leveling gear still, so that will bring down the numbers a little bit. But I can't look at any of the higher numbers because those set bonuses from Scarlet Enclave are extremely powerful. And then you got things like this, the Corrupted Ashbringer. Yeah, that's kind of the most disgusting weapon ever introduced into WoW. It will skew everything way too high. Warriors go off the charts with it, so there's no sense in looking at anything other than the averages in this case here. But let's look at those averages. Now, what this page shows is how classes do between Molten Core, which is, again, primarily the Community Fresh Molten Core, very average geared people, dungeon geared people, maybe they're Prebis, as it trends towards Scarlet Enclave per class, looking again at the averages, like I said, but they may have tier 2, tier 3, whatever. They have some set bonuses now that come into play. And in fact, the one I want to talk about first is Shadow Priest. They really come online with tier 2.5 set bonuses and some other ones as well. I forget all of it exactly. I don't play a Shadow Priest, but I know tier 2.5 is a big one for them. And if you see them in Molten Core where they came in 11th overall, they shoot up to number 2 overall for the DPS ranking. That's a huge increase. And if you've raided with one in the Scarlet Enclave, a well-geared Shadow Priest, they're absolutely insane. They will crush just about everybody on it, other than a Fury Warrior with a Corrupted Ashbringer. If they're playing their best, they're going to beat everyone. It's unbelievable how strong Shadow Priest is in Scarlet Enclave. Now, that being said, is it going to be that way in the future in Classic Plus? I don't know. No one does. But Shadow Priest, if you want to play a caster DPS that brings a lot of utility with between Fort, Shadow Protection buff, another Fear Ward, it's not a bad class to play. As long as you understand you're going to be behind until your power goes up from set bonuses or other things that may or may not be coming. So while I think it's still worth playing a priest, again, if you don't mind healing, you could always go into a healing spec like Discipline, which is very strong. We'll talk about healers in a moment. And you still will have plenty of utility to bring to the raid too. So not a bad class to play. However, let's talk about number 2 to number 1, Fury Warrior. Yep, nothing changes there. Fury Warrior stays great and actually gets a bit better as time goes on. So if I were to say again, Fury Warrior would be my number 1 pick. Shadow Priest, situational, But let's look at number 3 on the Enclave side, Affliction Warlock. Like I said, that's a great class to play, and they get much stronger later on with the set bonuses. So they raise from number 7 to number 3. That's a pretty big jump. I think that's worth looking at, because if you want a caster class that has that long-term viability, I don't think Affliction's ever going to get worse. It'll only get better as set bonuses come out. And again, just like with Shadow Priest, we don't know where they're going to be, but Affliction's already in a pretty decent spot to start. It might be, in my opinion, the best caster to invest in, especially if you just want to play the game, not worry too much about competing at the very top of the meters, but you want to still have a presence up there. Affliction might be the play. Fire Mage is also worth talking about too, where they kind of stay the same overall. But I think that's another class, going back to the previous slide, where if you play it well, if you're a skilled mage player, you're going to be able to rise above the average quite a bit. And Fire Mage does perform very well. So that's one that's probably worth looking at as well if you want to play a mage. Now, looking at what our number 1 was, Marks Hunter, down to number 6. Yeah, they don't scale as great with the gear and everything as other classes do. And in fact, I played a Marks Hunter for a lot of SoD and Scarlet Enclave. But they're not bad. They still bring a lot to the raid. They still bring aspect of the line and the other aspects. And if you look at the scores, they kind of just stay where they're at. They don't get worse. In fact, they even get better based on the numbers alone. They just fall behind some other classes. But again, if you want a nice, easy class to play, a pretty straightforward class, you just want to be able to show up, perform, not have to stress out like, oh, am I going to be benched if we don't have flex rating? God, I hope we have flex rating. Or am I going to fall behind? Marks is always going to be in the hunt. Marks and Affliction, I look at those two as like, those are the safe bets. You play those, you don't have to worry about being super sweaty like Warriors do, but you're always going to be in the mix. You're always going to be able to compete, and everything will always be fine and enjoyable. It's kind of how I look at it. Then we look at other classes like Retribution Paladin. I main that in all of SoD, and the power gains as the new sets came out just kind of got wild for Ret, especially if you're good at twisting, which isn't too hard if you haven't done it before. Ret just rises right up the charts. Same with Balanced Druid. It's kind of like the mini Shadow Priest in a lot of ways. As they get their set bonuses, they get a lot stronger too. So any of these classes here are pretty solid. I don't think you'd have to worry about playing any of those if you wanted to either get a raid spot, be a parse focused class, be able to perform well, not let your raid down. All of these classes are great. Where things get a little interesting is the drop off, and really the huge drop off for Assassination Rogue, where they just don't seem to compete very well at the end of the game. And SoD currently, I hope they fix that. I don't think any class that, especially like a rogue class, like all they do is DPS. Well, I'm gonna put the tanking aside for now. I don't see why rogue should have that kind of drop off, and I think that's just a miss on Blizzard's part in Season of Discovery. Something I hope they can fix. Similarly, Survival Hunter, I just want to call that out in case you're wondering there. The survival tree just becomes the melee hunter tree later on, so that's kind of a outlier for the Scarlet Enclave column. Nobody, who's playing ranged survival in Season of Discovery at this point? It's all about melee. And Melee Hunter kind of just stays where it is too, which is the survival tree for the most part. So no, you can skip over that one. But all in all, I like this one a lot too, because while I don't put, like I said at the beginning, I don't put any real faith in the rate column, it is a trajectory to think about. Well, if they just copy paste, if Blizzard's lazy and they just give a Scarlet Enclave as is, if it's just SoD 2 is what we're getting in Classic Plus, well, at least we kind of know the trend that we can expect for our class that we choose. Every class moves up and down. No one except for Frost Mage stays the same. So the way I look at this data here, this is really just to help make informed decisions for what may play out over time. For instance, if you're trying to do like a tiebreaker in your head between Assassination Rogue and Ret Paladin, yeah, you might want to go Assassination Rogue early, but Ret Paladin does seem to come online. And in fact, I can tell you it comes online in Season Discovery later on. So if Blizzard's lazy and just copy paste Season Discovery, that might be the long-term play to make. And some people only have time to play one character. They have like 5 kids and 7 wives and have to go to work for 22 hours a day. So, I mean, they may not be able to play all these alts and everything too that Season Discovery really made beneficial. So you can do things like swapping and playing the meta a lot easier. So if that's where you're at with this, I'd say try to use this as a guide until we have real data. And hopefully we'll have real data in about a month now. So right now, that's how I'm looking at this data. I'll use the left column to make my initial pick. I'll look at the right column and be like, oh, well, I want to re-roll later. Well, I want a main swap. Well, I have to think about if I become less competitive within my raid, should I swap to something else? Whatever it is. That's kind of how I'm thinking about this data here. But if I were to say, if I want to just make a call on the data we had that might be the most accurate, it's just the Molten Core column. Don't worry about the Scarlet Enclave one. Look at that ranking and make your decision from there. Now, we've talked entirely about DPS at this point, so let's talk about healers really quick. It's not as interesting talking about healers and healer parses and everything. It really just measures heals per second. But there is some interesting stuff to look at here. And again, we're looking just at Molten Core and Scarlet Enclave. In Molten Core, Holy Paladins are the king, which makes a lot of sense. It's a melee heavy raid. You have Beacon of Light, you put it on the tank and you heal whatever melee needs them nearby. Pretty obvious. By a similar argument, you can say, well, why is Resto Sham so far down? Chain Heal costs a lot of mana, maybe? I don't really know why. I haven't really analyzed the healing parses that close at all. But what's interesting here is looking how this list from Molten Core kind of flips in Scarlet Enclave. There's a few reasons for that. Mage Healer, again, another class that doesn't really come online until they have their set bonuses. But once they do, they get to be really, really good. If you've played with a good Mage Healer, you know that they are incredible with their ability to raid heal, unlike any other class in the game, really. Shaman rises right up the ranks. Discipline Priest, in my experience, was the strongest healing spec in all of Season of Discovery, so I'm not surprised to see that where it is. And Holy Priest is kind of right in the middle. The one healing class that I'm a little, even going back to the beginning of side, I was a little down on was Resto Druid. I feel like Blizzard didn't do enough for Resto Druid to make it that strong. But one thing I do want to say here too, is healing. There's no bad healing class. Having healers is more important than the class in a lot of cases here. Yeah, you want to have the right type. You want a distribution. You want a pally for the tank. You want your mage healer for raid healing. Yeah, whatever it is too. I wouldn't let this chart deter you from playing the healer you want to play. If you want to play mage healer and suffer through it from the beginning, go for it. No one's going to be like, oh no, a healer, especially if you have flex raids. Yeah, go ahead. Come on and get the gear, get better. And then you'll be our best friend as you heal us with your amazing mage healing as time goes on. Like, there's nothing wrong with any of these healers here. But it is interesting to show just how relative the strength is between the beginning and the end around those average geared players. That shows where really the set bonuses and all the other gear comes into play to really juice people up in the end. But again, I wouldn't put too much faith in this one here. Play the healer you want to play, and thank you for playing healer because everybody needs healers. And let's take a moment to talk about tanks too. There's no really good way to measure tanks on Warcraft logs. A lot of it is just based on damage done like a DPS class. It doesn't really show how effective a tank is in a raid. So really, the only data I have for that is purely anecdotal. I'll share it with you here, but again, don't put too much weight in this. I played with a rogue tank for the majority of Season Discovery, and rogue tanks ended up being absolutely incredible single target tanks. Their ability to generate threat and use all their ability to just not take damage because they were really a dodge and evasion based tank was awesome. I mean, they had to get nerfed a few times throughout because they were just too good and would not get hit at all. So I think rogue tank will still, and well, if they're a tank in Classic Plus, they're probably going to be that strong single target tank. Paladin tanks were incredible still, as you've seen, things like Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King that kind of were built just like those to an extent. Warlock tanks, I've seen some really great Warlock tanks, even recently in Season Discovery. Great for dealing with large trash packs. Also being able to tank bosses too. They kind of were like the jack of all trade tank as far as I've seen. Now, I said I don't have any experience with Shaman tank. I've never played Horde in Season Discovery, so I'm not even going to comment there. They do look fun though. I do want to say that. And warrior tanks are probably the one I am the least high on. I feel like they're kind of a druid tank with less going on for them. I've played with some even recently. They have struggled with threat. That might just be the warriors I've played with. I know warriors out there warrior tanks at least, diehards for their class. They'll disagree with me on that, and that's fine. Again, this is kind of like healers. There's no really bad tank option. It's just my personal experience with them. But again, if you're playing a tank, yeah, you're the best. Not enough people play tank, and not enough people play tank well on top of that too. So I really say if you want to play tank, if you want to play, let's say a feral druid tank, go for it. In Season Discovery, there was enough tools and utilities for all tanks to really be able to do all the content. And especially if you can shuffle it up with having a few different flavors of tank in your raid, you're going to be fine and you'll be able to get through anything anyway, especially dungeons. Any tank can tank dungeons. So even hunters were able to in Phase 1. I mean, we will see that again. But if you're playing any tank, I don't think there's any bad decision to be made there. Just play the one you think is the most interesting. So let's wrap things up with some tier lists based on what we saw here. And this shouldn't be any surprise if you watched the video to this point. These are purely based on the rankings we saw. And if you look at that left launch window there, 4 to 8 weeks, that's pretty much what I'd recommend playing. If you want to just focus on Molten Core, if you're one of those people that just says, my end game is to down Ragnaros, then I'm going to collect all the best gear that he drops and then never log in again. Yeah, first off, I know who you are. Second off, this is it. This is a list to follow. Fury, if you want to play melee. Marksman Hunter, if you want to play range. And if you want to play a caster, go Fire Mage. If you want to play a more utility or want to be important to your raid, Feral Druid. I mean, if Wild Strikes is back, play a Feral Druid. You'll be everybody's friend. I was for a while. I don't like Feral Druid. and I had no problems getting to anything I wanted. Now, if you think, oh, they're just going to replace SoD, I want to put my guesses towards what Scarlet Enclave has taught us. Look at that right chart. Again, Fury right at the top, Marksman Hunter down a tier, but not really that bad. We see the rise of things like Balanced Druid, Affliction Warlock. I think they're a solid pick no matter what goes on, so that'd be a great pick to make if you don't want to play Marksman Hunter, for instance, and Marksman Hunter still stays really strong too. So use this as a fun mental exercise. None of this is really going to play out like I'm presenting it here, because we don't know what's going to happen with Classic Plus. But based on the data we have, that left chart, that's what I'm going to put my faith in. That's what I'm going to base all my decisions on. I do plan on playing several characters, but where am I going to start? I'm going to start at the top of that list and work my way down. I may play a healer or a tank too, so who knows. Now, with all that said, let's talk about where this is going to be wrong. Now, what am I expecting in Classic Plus? I don't expect them to reuse the runes as they are now, which means a lot of the power that we gain early on especially may be part of the actual just regular build of the class, and probably tuned down a little bit so it's not as crazy. They're probably going to be different ranks. Maybe there's like things like new AQ books for training higher ranks of spells that won't come out until like new content comes out too. So there may be a little more gating on the power scaling that as opposed to what we saw in Season of Discovery. And also one thing too is this isn't purely an apples to apples measurement between Molten Core and Scarlet Enclave. Those are two different player bases for the most part. The people rating Molten Core aren't rating Scarlet Enclave. So this isn't the most true comparison. That said, though, we're looking at things in aggregate. We're looking at numbers here. Molten Core has about 4,000 more people rating than Scarlet Enclave does, so it's disproportionate in that regard too. But it's the data we've got. We really can't do much with the data we have because nothing's really real. None of this data exists yet in a Classic Plus context. We're working with whatever we have. So keep that in mind too. Also, these scores are normalized. They hide like true power in these things. For instance, a 100 parse Molten Core is not a 100 parse in Scarlet Enclave, and so on down the list. So it's not a true representation of the power between the different classes, between the different raids. And that's why I've been looking at this more as about trending as opposed to who pumps the hardest as a way to measure all this too. I don't care about the individual parses. I care about the trends over time and the averages across everything more than anything else. So keep that in mind too. Just because I say Fury Warrior is the best doesn't mean you're going to pump. It just means you're going to have the highest potential. You're going to be the class that averages the highest based on the data I have here, if that all plays out the way as I expect. And also the last thing is, going back to this in the beginning, we don't know what's going to happen with Classic Plus. They may have tuned every class. They may have retuned everything. We may see a fourth spec for every class. Maybe every class is a healing or tank role. Who knows? We know nothing at this point. So everything I talk here might be false, and I'm fine with that. Again, this is speculation ahead of when Classic Plus exists with the data we have. Everything here should be looked at as just really for entertainment and maybe to make those first decisions for what you're going to make at the start, because that's what I'm going to use this for until we have better data at least. So will this be wrong? Yeah, probably. I'd love to come back and revisit this later on to see if what I expect to be the classes that are popular and pumpers in the beginning, it plays out to be that way as things go on. And maybe we'll do that in a future video too. There's nothing really I'm more excited about to find out all the ways I'm wrong and surprised as Classic Plus comes out and really we get to have all this kind of information revealed to us over time. But for now, yeah, this is what I have and this is what I'm going to go with. But anyways, that's it for this video. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like button if you liked it, or dislike it if you didn't. And hit that subscribe button if you want to see more when the next video comes out in a couple weeks. Again, I really appreciate everybody out there watching this stuff, and love to hear more about what you think too. So leave a comment below. But that's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.